everybody, welcome to Tall Oak Homestead. My name is Carrie and thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be doing a little project in the kitchen and I thought I'd bring you along. I'm going to be pressure canning some potatoes. I don't know about you, but it just blows my mind how expensive potatoes are when you buy them by the bag. And when they're on sale like they are right now, I will grab a couple of extra and I'll pressure can them, and that way I have them on the shelf and ready to use whenever we want them. So let's get started. I have already peeled the potatoes because I didn't think you would be interested in watching me peel a whole bag of potatoes. So I'm going to get those into a bowl and we can get started. One thing I have done already is that my jars have all been washed and I've left them in the oven just on a very low temperature, just keeping them warm. Because what we're going to do is we're going to cut up our potatoes and we're going to put them in the jar. But at the bottom of our jar, I'm going to have some salt. That's my dog making that noise. We're going to have some salt. I'm also going to put in some fresh rosemary in the bottom of the jars too, just to give them a little bit of extra flavor. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get these potatoes cut up. As I mentioned, I do have my jars in the oven, just keeping them warm, because what we're going to do is we're going to put these potatoes into the jars and we're going to fill it with hot water. So if I'm going to be putting hot water into my jar, I want to make sure that my jar itself is nice and warm so that I'm not going to have a possibility of anything cracking. And when you're cutting your potatoes, you don't want them too small because they will end up turning to mush when they're pressure canned. You want them a good size. And you want to also keep looking to make sure that there aren't any bad spots on your potatoes. This is probably one of the easiest things I have canned, and they're absolutely delicious. I remember the first time I canned them, and I could tell by the look on my kids' faces they thought I was a little crazy. But after I cooked them for them, now I think I will be doing some extra canning for them. The way I cook them is I empty the jar and I saute them in a pan with a bit of butter, or you can also use a bit of olive oil. And you can just pan fry them until they're nice and golden. I know some people, I've seen that they use them, they make, oh, there's a bit of a bad spot there. They make potato salad from them. I've never tried that. Or they will take them out, warm them up and mash them. I've never tried those methods, but maybe that's something that I will try this go around. Typically I will just put a bit of salt in the bottom of the jar, which is required. You need to have a little bit of salt in there for the pressure canning, but I'm going to try it with rosemary this year. Because I do have some fresh rosemary that I've been growing downstairs. I wasn't sure what other herb would go well with that, but I thought I'd try with the rosemary and see. Maybe like an oregano, or I don't know. Couldn't really think what else I would use. You can also, if you want to pack them in a broth, you can use chicken broth, or you can, I don't know what beef broth would taste like. Vegetable broth would be good, but you could do that if you wish. I've just always used the water method myself. Now you can also, some people when they pressure can potatoes, they actually boil their potatoes first. I've never pressure canned mine like that. I always just cut them like this, which is actually, it's considered a raw pack method. I will just put these raw like this into the jar, fill it with the hot water, and then put it in the canner. Oh, there's a little bit of skin on that one. Let's get that off. But as I said, it is a very easy way to preserve potatoes. And especially I like to do it when they're on sale because, as I said, they can be quite expensive, but more so that it's time consuming doing this because you've got to cut them all up and then you have to get them pressure canned. For this size of jar, I'm using the large jar, the liter jars. They need to be pressure canned for 40 minutes. And based on my elevation at 11 pounds per pressure, which really isn't that long. Probably what takes the longest is peeling and cutting all of the potatoes, which I don't mind actually. I find chopping very therapeutic. Okay, almost done here. You can hear the water behind me coming to a boil, which will be good timing. Once I'm done this, I think what I'm going to do is get the water put into my pressure canner to make sure that it's at the right height, and I can start that warming up as well so that we're not putting jars in that are full of hot liquid into cold water, because that would just be a disaster. And I'm being mindful of the size I'm cutting here because I'm using both wide mouth and regular mouth jars. So if they're too big, they're not going to fit into the jar very well. All right, one down. And typically one bag of these potatoes fills about 6 jars. Okay, let's get the canner all set here. Before I do anything with the canner, I always like to check and make sure this steam hole here, you need to be able to see right through it to make sure it's not clogged. And I can see through that, that's great. And then you always need to check and make sure that your seal is in appropriately. So that's perfect. So now I'm just going to get some water. And we're going to fill it up to the bottom line of the canner. Just got to find my mark in here. Oh, there we go. You always need to make sure you have your little bottom piece in there. You never want your jars sitting directly on the bottom of your canner. Oh, get that filled up to the bottom line. I think one more will do it. There we go. Let's see, I've got it filled to that line on the bottom. I'm going to turn this on and get it starting to warm up. Okay, we're going to get the rosemary chopped up so that we can get that and the salt put in the bottom of each jar. You've got to put 1 teaspoon of salt, and you need to use pickle egg salt when you're pressure canning. This rosemary smells delicious. There's some herbs that I started a few months ago, and it's just so nice, beginning of March, to go down to your basement or wherever you have your herbs and grab a handful to use fresh in cooking, or preserving in this case. It's so nice. Okay, we'll get these chopped up. I'm not worried about doing them too fine. I don't want them whole. I just find when you chop up the herbs like this, it does release the oil, and it does give a nice fragrance. It adds a wonderful flavor to whatever you're doing. Okay, that should be plenty. I'm going to now get the jars out, and we're going to start filling with the potatoes. I'm going to get the jars out of the oven, and we're going to put them on this cutting board here so we can work with them. As I said, I'm using a mixture of wide mouth and regular mouth today. These are just some of the ones that first ones that I grabbed when I went downstairs in my stash, so it doesn't really matter to me which ones I use. Just gonna turn the oven off. Okay, so just gonna sprinkle a few herbs in the bottom of each. Oops. And to that, we're gonna add 1 teaspoon of salt. I poured it in this bowl here just because it's so much easier to scoop it out than to shake it out of the container. Perfect. Okay, and just for ease, I'm going to use this to fill the jars. Okay, start. And when we fill this up with water, we leave a 1-inch headspace. So what that means is you need, from the top of the jar to the top of your product, there needs to be 1 inch left. And that's required for the processing. Everything's different. When you do jam, usually anywhere from 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch. Tomatoes, I think it's 1/2. The white mouth ones certainly fill faster. Okay. I don't have enough here for a full jar, so it looks like whatever we're having for dinner tonight, we're having potatoes with it. Maybe just put a little bit more in each one. Oh, pretty good. Look, you can hear that I've got my window open here and the blue jays are squawking up a storm out back. Okay, I'm going to bring the pot of hot water over. And I'm going to scoop that into the jars. I think I'm going to still use that so we don't have a mess. I'm excited to share with you that last week my soil blockers arrived. So probably tomorrow I will be doing another video using my soil blockers because I have a lot of seeds that need to be started based on the schedule that I set out. I'm very excited for that. Not gonna lie, I'm probably gonna go to the greenhouse this afternoon and play around with the blocks a little bit so I get comfortable with using them. So I'm interested to see how this new method works out. It needs a little bit more. I'm gonna take this out. Look at I'll just top them up. Okay, actually I'm gonna take that one out there. It looks like it's got a little bit of a mark on it. Come on, why don't you come? Okay. These all pushed down. I don't like to have them sticking out of the water too much. there is sometimes siphoning that happens during the process. What that means is water's forced out of the jar, and that's okay. It's still perfectly safe. Okay, I think those are filled up enough now. We can get ready to seal them. Let's get this out of the way. Okay, my chopstick to work out any air bubbles. I can already smell the rosemary. It smells really good. Oh, that potato's got some marks on it. I don't want that in there. Oh, there's one here that does too. I wasn't paying attention. Okay. All right. So I feel good that there is no air trapped in there or any air bubbles. I'm going to wipe the top of each rim very well with vinegar. And you've seen me do this many other times. And what that does is you're making sure that the top of your jar is clean for a seal. And you're also making sure that you're not feeling any nicks on your top of your jar, because if there are nicks, two things can happen. It may not seal properly, but it's also your jar is at risk of exploding in the canner because there is a crack in the jar, so you want to be careful not to have that happen. We're going to put our lids on, our regular mouth, and then a wide mouth. And we'll put our rings on. I know some people wash their lids. I sometimes wash them, I sometimes don't. I'm not consistent with it. I will say I've never had an issue with not washing them in terms of any contamination or any particles showing up in my preserves that I did not want. Sometimes I forget. Okay, so these now are ready to go into the canner. You can see the steam coming out of the canner. The water is heating up nicely. We're going to put all of these in, and I'm always very careful not to have my jars touching. Just got to get them in there and then finagle them around a little bit. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, let's get the lid on. I've already checked to make sure that the seal is good. Line up the arrows, squeeze it tight. So now I'm going to turn it up high. And what we have to do now is we have to wait for it to come to a boil. You'll see right here, this little spout here. Once the water comes to a boil, steam will start spitting out of here. We have to wait for that to come to that boil for 10 minutes. Once that's come to a boil and the steam's come out of here for 10 minutes, we put this weight on. That weight goes right there, and that's what seals the can. And then the pressure gauge starts to increase. So for my elevation, I have to use 11 pounds or 11 psi. So I have to monitor the heat on the stove because it does rise quickly, but you want it to stay at a certain temperature. You don't want it to go under or over too far because it could not process properly. So we have to keep an eye on the pressure and adjust the stove accordingly. And then once it's reached that 11 pounds, that's when you set your timer. So for these potatoes in this size jar, they need to process for 40 minutes. So we're just going to wait for that to come up to boil, and then we'll go from there. If steam is actively coming out of that little spout, I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes. And then once that's gone for 10 minutes, we can put the little hat on and start the pressure canning. Okay, we've been boiling with the steam coming out for 10 minutes. Now is the time to put our lid on. Well, that was a little sloppy way to put my lid on, but it achieved the end result. The problem is once you get it on there like that, you see how I put it on and it kind of went sideways, so I had to push it on. I don't want to take it off because it's in effect sealed itself. You can see now this button here is starting to pop up. That means the pressure is starting to build in the pot. So we just need to now wait for the pressure to get to 11 psi, and then I can set my timer for 40 minutes. I do have notes that I've made for myself, just knowing what I need to have my burner on once I get to a certain psi, so that I can remain at a constant 11. So I'm just going to go make reference to that now, so I make sure to get this pot where it needs to be for the 11 psi. Okay, you can see the pressure is now at 11 psi. So I'm going to set the timer for 40 minutes. I'm also going to keep an eye on the pressure gauge for the next few minutes just so that it doesn't rise up too quickly. I'm going to have to adjust my burner to make sure it stays at 11 psi. Okay, our 40 minutes are up. I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to very gently lift this and move it over to the burner side here that wasn't on. Because my stove is glass top, I don't like to drag anything on it. So now what we need to do is we need to wait for the gauge to come down to 0. We need this to drop down, flush, and once that happens, we can take the little helmet off here, or the weight. I don't know why I call it a helmet, but we can take that off, and then we can open up the can and take our jars out. Okay, our pressure's down to 0. This little vent has released and gone down, so it's flush. So now we can take our helmet off. We just now need to wait 10 more minutes until we can open up the lid. While we were waiting for the pressure canner to come down, we took a walk around the block with Berkeley, and I stopped at the mailbox. Got a few more seeds. Some organic Dominator beans. I was right out of green beans. These are new. I've never tried these before. I've been doing a lot of research on companion planting, so I've changed some of my garden, but I'll share that with you when we start planting. So I got some celery, some herb, chives, some lovage. Never grown this before, but apparently it's a great companion plant for some. And I didn't have any nasturtium seeds left, so I got cherry rose, ladybird purple spot, and Alaska mix. These are great companions for many of the vegetables I'll be planting in the garden, and I'm looking forward to starting these and hoping they'll help out with some of the pests. Okay, our 10 minutes have elapsed, so we can now take the lid off. So you just rotate it to unlock it, and always be very careful to open it away from you, because as you see, the steam does come out in the water, and you don't want to wear that. Have a quick look inside. Oh, everything looks good. Nothing broken. Get those taken out. Let's slowly bring these out. You can see how hot they are. They're still boiling. And you can see that some of them have lost a little bit of water. That's called siphoning, and that is natural. That does happen. The water's a little not as clear as when they first went in, but that's from the potatoes themselves, because they're yellow potatoes, the starch, but also from the herb, the rosemary. Okay. There we have it. 6 jars of pressure can potatoes ready to eat. We need to wait for them to cool down, and you'll hear them pop. They'll seal, and then I leave them sit out overnight, and then I take the rings off to store them. I give the jars a good clean. Oh, there's a pop right there. One of them just sealed. You got to wash the jars down because, as I said, you can see this jar here has lost some liquid, as has this one. So that siphons off into the pot itself. So the jars they're a little dirty. So I'll give them a good wash down, and then I'll write on top of each of the jar the date so that we're aware, and then I'll add it to my list. I know. Oh, there we go. We'd love to hear that sound. I do keep a list of all of my preserves in the basement and the dates of them, just so that I know what's down there. Yeah, I know it's a little crazy, a little obsessive, but I just like to know what's down there. And it's always nice too when I'm putting together baskets to give to people for a gift. It's just nice to know what's down there. Thanks so much for spending the time with me today while we work through this project together. I'm really excited now to have these potatoes that I can put on my pantry shelf and use at a later date. I encourage you not to let pressure canning be scary. It can be a little daunting at first, but as long as you follow all of the steps, and you did see that there are very specific timelines for each step, and that's okay. You just must follow them accordingly. And once you're comfortable with that, it is an easy process. It's just, you just have to be very specific, and you got to be careful, of course. As you saw, like, you've got to open things a certain way so you don't scorch yourself, and you don't take the little helmet off when it's been put on. But again, if you just follow the steps, it's a very safe process, and then you have a wonderful product that you can put on your shelf that you can use. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye. We hope you enjoyed watching our video. If you did, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to help us grow our channel. Thanks so much for watching.